Hey everybody, welcome to Dad's Den of Pop Culture. I'm Dad. This is my den, and I've included some very subtle clues in this video about what I'm going to be talking about. Today I'm going to do part 2 of my little role-playing game journey that I took, going from learning to play on a playground to eventually doing some of my own self-publishing. And so today, obviously, we're going to be talking about Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. So I got into gaming in the mid-'80s. Say in and around 83, 84, 85 or so were sort of my formative years with it. Like I said in the last video, the first game that I ever had was the basic set, written by Tom Moldvay. And then I got the expert set. And it didn't take long, though, before I got wind of Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. Now, back in my day, I was getting most of these books at Toys R Us. Toys R Us had a little role-playing game section, and so go to Toys R Us for other reasons, and man, at a certain point, I went straight back to, I can almost picture like it was, I think, the far rear right corner of the store, and there they had the setup, like a wire rack that had all this Dungeons & Dragons stuff. So obviously, if Dungeons & Dragons was awesome, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons had to be even better. So I wanted to get these books. Now let's scoot Warduke out of the way here for just a moment. So these books were published, the earliest ones in about 1978-79 area, and they went from there. And this would be the official order of these books. Monster Manual, Player's Handbook, Dungeon Master's Guide, Fiend Folio. Now you notice I have deities and demigods, and I have legends and lore. Monster Manual 2, Unearthed Arcana, Oriental Adventures, Dungeoneer Survival Guide, Wilderness Survival Guide, Manual of the Plains. Now that's the official order that these things were sort of released and put out in. That is not the order that I got these books. Because again, I'm getting these things probably around 1985 is when I'm getting the first of these books. So, Monster Manual is not my first. Player's Handbook, and I'll admit this is not my original Player's Handbook, was maybe my first. Dungeon Master's Guide, and as you can see, yep, I got a bookmark in there. Fiend Folio, no. Deities, Legends, and Lore, no. I think the first book that I ever got out of all of these was Monster Manual 2. And I think I know why. If you have the basic game and the expert set, you have the rules to play the game for a very long period of time. You got all the rules you need, combat, etc. Saving throws, you got all the classes that you need. You got monsters, you've got treasure, you got the whole Megillah. Monster Manual 2 had some things in it that were genuinely unique. They weren't to be found in those sets. Now let's see if we got a copyright on this thing. So this is copyright 1983. So I was probably getting this maybe the year after it initially came out. And it's possible I had the Player's Handbook first. I don't know, but I think it was this, and I'm positive I had this book before I had the Monster Manual. And I fell in love with this book. I just did. It was amazing. It's a lot of information. It's a lot of monsters. a lot of really interesting monsters, weird monsters. And much like I did with that basic set of mine, I opted for the color version. Let me see. Golly, I got all this stuff right in front of me. If you can kind of see. There we go. Okay, there we go. That's a little more centered. I went for the color version. I actually used colored pencils on quite a few of the illustrations in this book. Not all of them. Although I think I intended to. Yeah, some great stuff. The Azers, Baku. You got the fire bat. I remember I had a character that I'm quite positive got to where he got through some very creative Monty Hall style dungeon mastering. I had a grandfather of assassins who had a giant sort of fire bat mount. How does that work? I don't know. Again, when you're 13 or 14 years old, yeah, you value results, not necessarily how you got there. Yeah, Arcano Demon. Yeah, the Daemons. Yeah, those were kind of cool. Matt Damon. The Davis. Oh, the Darrows. Yeah, the Darrows are cool. And obviously, they kind of are somewhat inspired by that weird story, the Shaver Mysteries. Yeah. Yeah, the Devils. I mean, you didn't have those in Basic. These were the first ones I ever saw. Mammon always has stuck with me, that picture of the giant laughing evil chubby guy. Dinosaurs. I guess they're Dwergar, but I'm pretty sure when I was a kid I pronounced it Duergar. Driders. Drelbs. That's one thing you find when you're talking with other D&D people. You oftentimes do not know how to pronounce some of this stuff, and they're very different pronunciations. Oh, the Furbolg. Yeah, the Furbolg were a big deal. I remember having that miniature. I thought the Furbolg were really cool. I always wanted to have one, like, as a character. So anyways, Monster Manual 2. Yeah, this is my copy that I had. It's still in pretty darn good shape, really, and it definitely saw a lot of use back in the day. Quite a bit of use. Unfortunately, not a ton of abuse. But soon after I had that book, hell, maybe on the same basic time, I got the Player's Handbook and I got the Dungeon Master's Guide. Now you'll notice this is the second cover of the Dungeon Master's Guide. This is my original DM's guide. It definitely shows some wear. What do I have? Let's see. What do we have bookmarked in this thing? And mind you, that would have been relatively... Oh, reputed magical properties of gems. Yeah, that was probably when I was writing my Land of Nod supplements. I was probably looking at that just to get some ideas, inspiration. So this is the second cover. Now, the original Player's Handbook that I had did have that second cover. The sort of bluish cover with the wizard, which I don't have anymore, and I kind of want to get. I really do like that cover. This, of course, was the original cover. Dave Trampier. An absolute classic. Yes, I think Super 7. Did they? I think Super 7. No, they released the Afridi as a... well, they haven't done it yet, but they got pre-orders up for D&D action figures. Yeah, so this one I got much later because my original Player's Handbook lost a combat with a little black and white cat named Oreo. And Oreo had ripped up several pages that I believe right around in this area. I still used that book for years and years and years and years. I eventually got rid of most of these, gave them to somebody else, because I was just getting out of the game. I got back into the game later, and that person had kept most of the books that I had given them and happily gave them back to me. And I don't use a lot of names, obviously, on the channel, but Jessica, thank you. I owe you one. So I got this much later on because that player's handbook didn't survive, and it makes sense. It was ripped up. It made sense not to. So this one was apparently owned at one point by Peter Cornell, and then Ali Vafi. There you go. I know a lot of people hate that kind of stuff in books because they're purists. They want everything perfect. I kind of love that stuff. So we got the player's handbook, DM's guide. I technically played Advanced Dungeons and Dragons for many, many, many years. But in truth, I probably never actually played Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. And here's what I mean. I learned off of the basic and expert sets. Obviously, easy to digest those rules. There's not a lot there. And that meant I knew how to play Dungeons and Dragons. So when I got the player's handbook, I didn't read cover to cover. I already know how to play the game. But what I did do was find all the new cool stuff. The strength table, etc. Oh, look at these bonuses that you get. The additional races in the game. Half elf, half orc. Aren't those cool? I still love that picture. I had somebody sort of do a version of that for one of my books. And you got these new classes. Druids, illusionists, assassins, paladins, rangers, the monk. Man. So what we started doing was just adapting all of that into our game. You got more equipment. You got more armor. You got all these additional spells. Tons and tons and tons of spells. And so what we really did was just grab all of these cool things, cool options. Oh, psionics. Oh, I can't forget psionics. You had the additional alignments. We took all of that stuff. We folded it in. Ooh, the bard. We fudged where we had to, and we essentially played Moldvay Cook D&D with a whole lot of options from Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. I have often joked that to this day, I can almost randomly grab a page out of the DM's guide and find some rule that I did not know. Because even at this age, I have never read this thing cover to cover. But there was so much good. And I'll tell you what, if you're a modern role player, if you're playing a fantasy game that's not even Dungeons and Dragons, go find one of these in one of the various versions that it's published. This thing is packed. This thing is packed with goodies. Packed with goodies. Unbelievable book. So much good stuff in it. So much good stuff in this book. Ad for Gen Con. Oh yeah, you know what? You got the funny cartoons. I loved those things. I loved the art. Oh, why can't I think of the artist? It's on the tip of my tongue. I remember turning a lot of those into characters over the years. Sample Dungeon. I'm positive I used that at some point. Positive that I used that at some point in a game. There's so much. Detection of invisibility table. Did I ever use that table? Who knows? Call Woodland Being. You have all that in there. Oh yeah, there's the class, one of the classics. The guy's dressing up in the mouse ears to infiltrate the table. And we got the... Yeah. I love that stuff was in there. It made it so much more of a welcoming game. It didn't take itself so seriously. So I got a ton of use out of these books, even though I didn't necessarily follow every rule that was in them. Now, eventually, I did get the Monster Manual. Yes, I did some color work in the Monster Manual, too. Oh, purple worm. How do you not color that? It's gorgeous. Yeah, and, any new sort of rules that we would adopt, oftentimes we would find them while we were going through the monsters and the spells, because there'd be a reference we didn't understand. There's some elves in color. Elf Patrol in color. There's the Naga. So, and this relates to my publishing of games. I like a simple rule set, and I like tons of different options. Not that you necessarily use all the options in every game, but having them there means you can sort of craft the campaign that you want to craft. And so I like having all that stuff available. So when I did the second edition of Blood and Treasure, well, the first one as well, but especially the second, that was something that I really focused on, was paring the rules down to get them as simple as I could, but then getting all the cool, fun extras into the game that I could as well, so people could just be inventive without having to rewrite everything for themselves, or having to try to convert from something else. Give me just a minute here, because I'm very professional. So I think the next book that I got after I had the Monster Manuals and the Player's Handbook and DM's Guide was Legends and Lore. This is the original one that I owned. I still absolutely love that cover. This kind of got me into studying about mythology. That was not something I was ever that interested in. I can remember going to the library and finding a whole book on like Norse mythology. It was for kids, but it was good. It told the stories. This one too, has, and you get that in some of the other ones. It has art that's more meant for adults than children in some cases. Nothing too embarrassing. Let's go to the greatest piece of art in the book. There it is. Come on. I mean, if I was running like a modern Norse cult, I'd use that in my recruitment posters. And you'll notice I also have up there, oh no, you can't really see it, darn it. I got some of the recreations that were done by Jeff D. And so I have that smaller picture of Thor hanging up on my wall. Love that art. So now if you were a serious gamer and a grown-up, Legends and Lore, and this is one I bought later, Deities and Demigods, opened up some new options for your game for very high-level gaming and all that. If you were in junior high when you got this was a combination monster manual and shopping list. I can well remember me and my friends going through, and in many places, saying, okay, I even remember doing a whole session like this, picking out gods that we wanted to take out so we could get their weapons. And because we were kids and playing Monty Hall style, and again, not really paying attention to all the rules, to the vast number of resources these deities have, hey, it worked. So this was the original Deities and Demigods. So Legends and Lore was a reprint, and I can only assume they retitled it because of the demonic panic that happened, where all of us D&D kids were, being warped and blah, 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 blah. But this one I did buy because I wanted one with the Cthulhu mythos in it. And it's a good copy. It's a good copy. Oh, look at that art. Look at that art. Yeah, Legends and Lore. I probably spent just a massive amount of time reading through that one. Because it was all new to me. I didn't have any background in in mythology really when I got into this stuff. So that was great. Unearthed Arcana, I think, is what I got next. This, I think, was a Christmas present. It was this book. This is the point where Dungeons and Dragons might be sort of getting ready to jump the shark. And I don't mean that really, but you get more options. You get the Cavalier, the Barbarian. These are pretty, maybe a little overpowered classes. You get some spells. But at this point, the need for splat books, I think, was getting a little bit less and less. There's some nice options in this. It's a great cover. And I definitely used it. I mean, as soon as you found out about the Cavalier Paladin combo, if you were a power gamer who didn't want to get involved with that, I mean, that was serious stuff. And those were probably my original books that I had through high school. Funny story I got to add here. I had a friend in junior high who I believe later became a doctor. And kind of your prototypical, almost stereotypical nerd in that he carried a briefcase to school. Even other nerds were kind of like, dude. Come to find out later on, when he had that briefcase opened up on his desk, he usually had like the Monster Manual inside, and he was reading it in class. I mean, that's like peak nerd. Using your briefcase in junior high to hide the fact you're reading D&D books. But this was probably my original set that I had. And then I sort of got out of the game for a little while. You just get busy with other things. And in college, I got into... No, you know what? I'm already telling a lie because I definitely had these. I had all of these books before I had the Fiend Folio. Yeah, and I'm not going to go through all these hardcore. Again, beautiful cover. Oriental Adventures was a big deal because it was just, again, it was so much stuff you didn't know. Samurai and ninja and all this stuff. One of the things these books were so great at was just opening you up to new things. I mean, the vocabulary that I learned playing this game, plethora. Before it was used in Three Amigos, I learned it from the Dragon Magazine article, A Plethora of Paladins. And you'd have to go look stuff up in the dictionary sometimes. Increased my vocabulary, definitely helped with my math skills. And it introduced stuff just enough to you that it made you want to go find out more. Now these, again, original books, these are maybe some of the ones I have in best condition, although I do see a little bit of wear from the shelf. Dungeoneer's Survival Guide. Wilderness Survival Guide. Manual of the Plains. The reason these are in pretty good shape is I barely used those things. I barely cracked them open. I just didn't. And to this day, Manual of the Plains had some interesting stuff in it, but if you weren't doing that really high-level adventuring, you just didn't need it. And Wilderness Survival Guide and Dungeoneers, you got the introduction of the non-weapon proficiencies in Oriental Adventures, which was a fancy D&D way of saying skills. And they were kind of cool at the time. You got those in the Wilderness Survival Guide, Dungeoneer Survival Guide. They were cool, but they just weren't that necessary. Again, you're starting to get, I don't want to say rules bloat per se, but a little bit rules bloat. Stuff that, we used to just handle it. And now you go, I guess maybe I should be rolling dice or something. So I didn't get a lot of use out of those books. But this one, this is the last of all the original books that I ever bought. I can kind of remember the place I got it. It was a game shop with a bunch of miniatures, a bunch of models and stuff that was right by UNLV. And I'm blanking on the name of the place. And I'd never had this book. I finally got it. So I got it in college. And I was already playing second edition by then. And this one really blew my mind. Now I know that these monsters in this book come from White Dwarf magazine. And they're Fiend Factory articles. I didn't know that at the time. Extremely original and extremely British. They have just a different way of looking at things. But also, what you get in this is a ton of great art. And maybe is my favorite book in terms of art. Russ Nicholson. I love Russ Nicholson's art. I had him do the cover for one of my books. Love his art. You get some Willingham. I mean, come on, the Drow, the Dark Elves. Oh, so good. So good. That was probably the last one I got. And I think getting this book, because it was so creative, and I know this will offend some people, but I didn't find second edition AD&D that creative. In fact, if you go back to the earliest Dragon magazines and the earliest versions of the game, everything's wide open, and you get a massive amount of creativity. No holds barred. You just do whatever you want to do. You get some sci-fi mixed in. You get all this wonderful stuff. And that's the era this comes from. And as it goes, it starts to become a little more standardized. Until really you get to like third edition, and it almost becomes very mechanical at that point. And I was in that more mechanical frame of mind with second edition. And then I got this thing. And this sent my brain back to the influences of D&D. It got me searching things out. Really made me a much better role-playing game dungeon master. It made me a better creator. I owe a lot of what I did with like my Land of Nod magazine and that campaign setting to Fiend Folio, just of saying, man, dude, just go bonkers here, right? Like Bob Ross, just go wild. Want to put a tree over there? Put a tree over there. Just go wild, right? This thing helped me go much more creative, much more wild in what I was doing, and made the game way more fun for me. Way less of an exercise in checking the boxes, getting everything where it should be. And there's a on YouTube, there's this great, I know I'm going long here, but whatever. On YouTube, there's this interview between Barbara Walters and Dolly Parton. And Barbara Walters is honestly kind of a jerk through this thing to Dolly Parton. Very combative in how she was asking her questions. And Dolly Parton was chef's kiss, the way she handled it. But there's this one point where she's asking her about some of her style. And isn't it a little bit out there, some of the stuff you wear? And, isn't it not, the fashion, the style? And Dolly says, in my opinion, there's nothing tackier than being stylish. In other words, than doing what everybody else is doing, reading the magazine. What's the look? What colors am I supposed to wear? Do what you want. And that goes here too. Tolkien is awesome. Not every fantasy setting should look like Tolkien. Right? Think of some of the greats of old D&D, the Ardwin Grimoire. Think of some of the Gonzo stuff. Think of what went into Gamma World. There's a whole world of creativity out there. Don't worry about should I do this? Is it right? Have fun. Have fun. Go crazy. That's how I like to do this stuff. Fiend Folio, big book for me because of that reason. And I've gone 30 minutes now talking about these books and their beautiful orange spines. As much as I love Basic and Expert, and that's really, I spent a lot of time on these advanced books. And I learned a lot from them, and I had a lot of fun with them. And I think any number of them are worthy of getting, even to this day. Like I said, the DM's Guide, whatever you're playing, there's a lot of good stuff in the DM's Guide and a lot of good advice in the DM's Guide for running games. And right up there, I'd also put in Fiend Folio and Deities and Demigods. Great resource books, great things to get you started and get your mind going in the right directions. So, hey, with that, we'll call a close to part 2, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. I actually plan to maybe hit a couple other topics, and I don't want to run this too long and do that. So there will be a part 3 where we'll start looking at, we'll probably do a little bit with 2nd edition and how I got into that, and probably do a little bit with maybe some of the things that were influences on D&D or earlier versions. Because the heck with it. I know I'm running long. But I did want to bring this in to an extent. This is the Holmes Basic Set, which is sort of the precursor to Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. It was the first attempt at taking those original books that were not very well organized and putting them in better shape, and getting moving. What you ultimately got was a lot of the elements of this go into Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. You can almost think of it as the basic version of Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. And then the Moldvay Cook basic sort of went in a slightly different direction. We'll talk about this in another part. But, again, look at that. I love it. I love it. Does that not make you want to get in and play? Find out what's going on? Awesome. Apparently I have the cover upside down because the other side. Anyways, so we'll call this for part 2 of my role-playing game journey. If you enjoyed the video, please hit like. If you are enjoying these videos, please hit subscribe. That helps my channel grow and will give me an opportunity to maybe do more with this. If you have any comments, I'd love to hear them. I'd love to hear about your history with these books and the ones that you loved and some of the cool stuff that you did with them. That it's all about sharing this stuff, right? That's why we're all into this. That's why we have these little fandoms, right? So leave some comments. I'd love to see that too. So until further notice, this is Dad's Den of Pop Culture. I'm Dad. This is my den. I hope you have an awesome day and have some fun out there. Be kind to everybody, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.